we live? Like we're recording right now, like
We are
for the
recording.
podcast?
I mean, I could cut this so none of it's on there, or we could just keep it.
All right. Well, so should we do our intro?
Yeah, but I don't have music.
All right, ready? I'll cue you in, Drew.
Wait, hold on. Go.
Three strangers picked to live in a gym and talk about their coachability. That's all I came up with really for the intro today. Anyways, for this week's episode of Dauntless Podcast, T. Elliott Field is going to talk about coachability and mentally break us down. By us, I mean Shannon and myself, as in terms of how coachable we are. So stay tuned and listen to all of the action.
And I gotta tell you, I don't know if I'm emotionally ready for this, but
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
gonna try.
I have no idea why you guys signed up for this. Let me turn the fan on real quick so Shannon and I don't die, and then we'll
'cause
get into the roast.
He knows he's about to make me freaking sweat with all this talk. Yeah, I was at my sister's wedding last night, so I'm pretty exhausted.
tequila.
I didn't drink, but I'm still very tired. So
Okay.
we'll see how this rolls.
I'm really sorry if the audio is terrible, but who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay. Shannon, you're going first.
Okay.
So I thought about this a little bit. I actually thought maybe we could bounce back and forth because there are a lot of topics and there were a few things that I was trying to go in order, looking up definitions of like coachability and what I meant by being a stubborn athlete versus consistent versus enthusiastic, all these things and these metrics that I tried to place upon you, and then also giving you scores out of 10, which is not a perfect system, but kind of gets you in the ballpark. And then I'm also, just a caveat, is kind of like I'm looking at this through a lens of what I was trying to build or what I see in an athlete. So it's not like this is the final say in who or what you are. Don't touch the plant. It's poison ivy, actually. No. But it's more of a, I think more importantly, the best you could take out of it is the evolution or the direction that you're going with a lot of these qualities instead of exactly where I put you. And so there's going to be a point where you're going to get a little bit frustrated with maybe some of the places that I put you, but it's relative to people, and it's it other factors like who else is in the class also matters. All right. So Shannon and Drew came to us extremely early, as in day one to Dauntless Academy. It was ever proven Exeter, but always Exeter CrossFit. And so they were very different athletes. Shannon gets the overall most changed. Drew was fairly consistent, but he also had some things that degraded and then also improved. So in terms of the journey, we can talk about it. We'll talk about Shannon's like huge leaps that she's had, and then also Drew is more of a slow, what you would kind of expect, low trajectory to a long distant horizon, but with with some turbulence. So the first category that we can go over is consistency, and this is super important. So what I meant by consistency, or what I mean by consistency, is how consistent are you as an athlete or as a member coming to the gym. And in the very beginning, I said that Shannon was a 7 out of 10 in consistency.
You say so?
Yeah, and this is my truth, Shannon.
No, I get it. I'm just trying to chime in also.
Okay, yeah. So if you disagree, obviously this is the whole part. It just doesn't need to be me just like picking you guys apart. But do you agree with 7, or do you think it's lower or higher?
I thought it was lower, to be honest with you. Like,
so
when I first started coming, I had to make a jar. This is so stupid. I made a jar. It actually wasn't stupid because I guess it worked and it made you think that I was a 7. But I sometimes wouldn't go. Like, I just drive by the gym. Like, I'd have every plan to go to the 5 o'clock class. This was before we had, logging in. And I would just drive by because it was after work. I didn't want to go. So I made this jar that I put in my car, and it had all these popsicle sticks in it that had different motivational sayings that would encouraged me to go to the gym. But the most important one, because I never actually took them out of the jar, but I wrote one that said, if you want to be part of the community, you have to go be part of the community.
Ew.
And
Love it.
once I wrote that one, did start going more frequently. But I had to like do those things with myself because it didn't come naturally. So 7 to me is pretty good.
Yeah, sorry. So, small side rant. Oftentimes we'll have people say that we have a great community, and then other people may not feel that they have a great community. If you don't feel that the community is good or giving back or, as exciting, oftentimes it's how much are you putting in to get back. So when I went on that little Instagram rant, the thing with most of these types of community, it's kind of like you kind of like earn your spot by just showing up and trying hard. And some people want to be more involved in the community, and you kind of have to help a few people before they help you. So, in most relationship, if you just kind of go in and try to take, and then just get your boost, that's not really how it's going to work. Not that anyone will shun you for it. It's just I think deeply in our nature to be like it needs to be a give and take. Okay,
Mhm.
so consistency in the gym. But consistency outside of the gym, and this is where you might not this is like a 3.
Yeah, totally.
So it was like when you were there, when you would show up, and I didn't get to see from my perspective your battle that you were having driving past. Like I didn't be like, "Oh," like if you would have texted me every time you would have skipped class when you
Yep.
planned, then maybe I'd say, "Oh, well, what you were planning on showing up and what you actually did may have been a 5 or a 4." But when I saw you and when you showed up, it seemed like you were when you showed up to the gym, you were there and you were a consistent person. Meaning like sometimes you didn't show up and you just kind of half-assed it. Sometimes you were all in. It was like if Shannon showed up to class, you knew that's the Shannon that you were getting.
Mhm.
All right. And then for Drew was I'm gonna kind of spoil it a little bit, but I guess he was a 7 to start as well
Okay.
for showing up. Then later on, he went to a 9 in consistency, and then he dropped and is currently at a 5.5.
How later on?
5.5.
Oh,
How later on before he was a 9? Like what's the timeline here we're talking
oh,
about?
okay.
7,
So
9, 5.
yeah, the first year was a 7, maybe till 2000, right? And it's right before. So the first year was a 7, then he ramped up to a 9. And then, because I finally got into his head and had him compete with somebody, but then he quickly broke away from that. And then after obviously like pandemic and his job, and this is the most case for people
Mhm.
where other things take priority, like money and family, totally understandable. Uh, then he dropped to a 5.5. He did, however, work out in his garage a lot and get programming and still go, but specifically like community member coming to the gym, like showing up for the community, like you had on your popsicle stick, that then went to like a 5.5, which isn't necessarily bad. You know what I mean? We have some ones at the gym, but that's their life and that's their relationship with the gym, and that's okay. But
If you know yourself, I think if you or if like excuse me, well, I don't know how to put it differently. I guess if you know yourself pretty well, like the numbers shouldn't be super surprising,
Yeah.
right? Like like I knew that was going to be the trajectory that Elliot was going to say for me. I mean, but it's also like you know how did when we started back in what year did we start? 2018, March of 2018,
Yeah, March
right?
12th.
March of 2018, 2019, like those were all really heavy years, like there were no issues. Then we have the pandemic. And then for me, right, like I also picked up cycling again and started racing again. And so that,
Mhm.
that pulls you away. Um, and you can tell, like I'll come into some classes and I'll be like, man, I don't know who that person is. And that's strange. Whereas the first 2 years, I knew everybody unless they were totally brand new, So
yeah, you were almost like
that's
the front desk.
exactly. So the only thing I've got going for me now is that sometimes I bring in a dog and people want to talk to me more because I've got a dog there.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see the people that were like an 8 or 9 or 10 consistency in like the first year and a half. They have that feeling of like, oh, I help like build this community and I was a big part of it, which is absolutely true.
Yeah,
And then they take like a couple months or weeks or maybe even a year off and they come back with that like, oh, I'm going back to my community. And they almost know like no one because we have some churn rate and, people move away and come back and all that stuff.
yeah. Well, and you got to go to the right class times and
And
things
yeah,
change.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
they're kind of like, oh, this isn't the community how I thought it was. Like it's evolved. So it's, maybe we'll interview somebody with that type of perception one day, but I notice it. Obviously, I'm one of the
No,
most, I'm the most consistent thing in Dauntless Academy history, right?
that's true. That's true. But I get that. I took those 8 weeks off when I was working with the community theater in Epping um at the end of 2019. And I just remember I just couldn't get to the gym. I was at the theater every single night. And so I took 8 weeks off.
I remember that.
And I came back and in the first class on that Saturday, Elliot coached and he was like, "All right, we got a big announcement today." And it was a huge class and he was like, Shan's back." Like everybody applauded and I like legit almost cried. It's like, what the heck is this place? Like I can never leave this place for any weeks ever again because where are you going to go somewhere that, some people are actually, applauding that you're returning. It was awesome.
Right.
You don't think people clap for you when you return to Planet Fitness?
No.
Oh.
I don't think people return to Planet Fitness. I think the business model is that they don't. So
Don't talk
that's
about
another
other
podcast,
gyms on my
so
podcast,
yeah,
please.
we're gonna have to bleep that out.
Beep.
Sponsored by Planet Fitness.
Get your Tootsie Rolls. So, and then next is enthusiasm. This one's an easy one. It's a softball.
Wait, you didn't say where I'm at currently.
Oh, sorry. You moved up to an 8.5.
Excellent.
So, Shannon and I had a goal setting session and it was more like a therapy session. And this is, I think this is a really important topic. And I think for me personally, I think this is one of the biggest breakthroughs because as a coach and a gym owner, you were a member for, I think, only almost 18 months. And you loved it and you kept showing up at like your 7 to maybe, self-admitted 5
Mhm,
consistency out of 10. And there weren't really any results in
mhm,
terms of like some of your strength numbers and some of your metcons. And you were just like, as one does, just developing more skills. So maybe you were just getting more efficient with your movement or more
mhm,
consistent, which would give you better times. But like physiological changes, they were very minimal, especially for someone that had been going as often for like 18 months.
mhm,
And then so, it's hard to be like, well, is my program not working? Is what I'm doing like why isn't this working for Shannon? Like
mhm,
she's been here the first and you said it too. It's like it's hard to be like, "Oh, I've been here the longest and I've been here since day 1." And everyone's kind of like, "Well, why aren't you like as fit as Elliot or as fit as Meg?" And I don't think Meg was coaching at this time, but it was just kind of one of those like you were kind of the technically the big one of the biggest billboards for the gym if you were there the longest. So
mhm,
we kind of had that conversation. We really dug deep down into, what was the problem and we found that it was initially breaking free from your first big life problem, which was like the your relationship with food.
yeah, yeah.
And then so the way that
Is this the absolute Shannon
this
conversation?
is that
Okay.
conversation, yeah. And this is important. I think a lot of people may have this problem. Uh, so you, went to therapy for, and she already told me I could talk about this, so I'm not just like putting her on blast. You went to,
Shut
wait, what? Shannon's in therapy. So you went to try to solve this problem, which is awesome. And I think that's exactly what you should do. You have a problem that you can't solve or that you've
Mhm,
tried to solve. And you were like, listen, I have a bad relationship with uh, food and body image and stuff like that. I want to get over this. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
yeah.
So then you created this character in yourself that you were like, you know what? I'm kind of more of like a Buddha. Like I want to try hard on certain things, but like overall, I need to keep resorting back to like it's not that big of a deal. I don't need to just go all in and starve myself and be as skinny as possible.
Yeah.
I should be able to have fun in my own body and have happiness, which is absolutely true. And then so that got you pretty far away from that relationship with food and body image. So then you started feeling better about yourself, but it kind of led you astray to the point where you're like, okay, I keep kind of half smiling, telling myself I love myself, but and I don't want it to be focused on my physical form, but I know that my physicality is holding me back at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah.
You were holding on to some excess weight that you were like, listen, I love my body and I'm okay with everything, but like I want that physical prowess or ability, and that is holding me back. So you were in this like, oh, like I want to improve my body, but I don't want to start looking at my body
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah. Well, I spent so much time like dispelling the belief that I had to lose weight to be good, right?
Or happy or
Or
yeah.
happy or anything, right? And so it made it so that I really couldn't create goals around that or in this gym very well because a lot of them came back to me just wanting to be, lighter, wanting to be more agile. Like those things just kind of come hand in hand. And even if weight loss wasn't like the primary goal, getting better in the gym and having like physical capability goals, you still need to be eating right. You still need to be fueling yourself in a specific type of way. And I remember I came into the gym once and I was just dogging it in a workout, and you were like, "Well, what did you have to eat today?" And I was like, "A peanut butter and jelly at 11 o'clock, and it's now 6 p.m." Like it was just garbage.
Right.
So that meeting was super important for me. And you did that, and you explained all of that in a much more succinct way than I ever would, and so this is great.
Well, from my
But
perspective, it was in this, and we see this, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, and not that you should be able to complete any goal that you set, but over that 18 months, you'd be like, I want to do a rope climb. I want to do this. I want to
mhm,
do this. And then you would meet some resistance, or you would start to, and this was the big turning point in the thing where we created like absolute Shannon, or what was the other one? Buddha Shannon, or whatever.
yeah,
There were
I
two.
think it was just either I'm absolute Shannon or I'm not. And absolute Shannon meant like I can set a goal and I can pursue that goal with a healthy support system around me, and it can be about something in doing something in the gym, or it can be about losing 10 pounds because I can do that in a healthy way now with the tools and I've learned, and the people that I have around me supporting me in this gym.
Right, because you would compensate by you'd be like, "Well, I don't wanna go back into, like,
I don't want to
crazy
get
Shannon
crazy
of,
about it.
like
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just have it obsess over my life and go back to that toxic." So you kept looking at any form of resistance was the cop out of like, "Oh, nope. I'm not the person who goes crazy like this again." But
Mhm.
then you kept failing your goals. So we had that conversation of like, "Listen, you can healthily pursue a goal that you really want to hit with the help. Like obviously doing it alone, but you were in therapy and you were talking to us and like trusting me with like safe steps to get you there. So at that point, then the next 6 months of your life, there was like you could just see it. Every once in a while, we'll get people in the gym and they'll be here. The story isn't rare. It's like they come for a long time and then
Mhm.
eventually they draw a line in the sand or they
Yeah.
come to a realization and then you started making all these gains. And then this is like my favorite thing that I always where like people are like, wow, Shannon's losing all this weight. Wow, how did Shannon do it? Like it all just happened at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, well, it took her 18 months of relatively hard work to really then start like launching herself in. And then, you're still on that path. And you've also matured to the point where the path isn't just a rocket ship line where like it was great where when you really nailed down that 6 months, you had like a pretty great upward trajectory for a long time, but then you kind of plateaued out. And that's what typically happens. And sometimes you'll regress and then you get back on it and you get a little bit higher than you were before in terms of progress. And then you keep doing that like wavy line upward trajectory. But
Mhm.
then you're also battling with like age and lifestyle and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So sometimes if you're maintaining throughout your age, that is great as
Yeah.
opposed to like a slow decline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're a 50-year-old and you haven't hit a PR in a while, but you can still hit within like 5 to 10% of what the most you've ever done, that is wonderful. And you should just keep maintaining that. You know,
Yeah, well, because at a certain point, also, I think, the law of diminishing returns, you take that little dip and then you have to put in even more effort to climb the next hill or the next peak, like to actually get that upward trajectory higher. So that's what I'm dealing with now, is I'm trying to break through to the next barrier.
and
But
then
this is a long conversation about me being an 8.8.5.
right. So that I was just about to say. So that goes into the coachability piece, and then I'll start in on Drew. So
Yeah, let's go.
that
Drew
coach,
needs some
hold on, that
tea.
coachability piece of yours, you were one of like you were a 3 in the gym, even though you were like out, you were taking
Oh my
advice and
gosh,
doing all that
really?
stuff. It was like yeah, you're a 3, but like what you're doing outside of the gym is completely just ignoring what the hour we have in here. So
Mhm.
then now you've, progressed into like an 8 coachability, 8 or 9, where you're like, you're setting the goals, you're making it happen. And then the only reason it's not a 10 is because like you have other important things like your relationship with Michael and like your career and stuff like that. So, which is not a bad thing to allow, your
Yeah.
coachability. But ideally, if everyone was just unemployed and they just did
Yeah, if everyone
whatever,
was a professional athlete in here, yeah,
right.
your job would be pretty cool.
All right. And then so Drew, he came to us very coachable, but I would say a little bit stubborn and
A
a
lot
little
of it stubborn.
a lot. Yeah, I have you on a 7, and I when you first came, and then you're still a 7 um,
For stubbornness.
for stubbornness. But you you came with a certain like a stubborn curiosity, right? Because you were like you came with a very analytical sports mindset of like, okay, I know what is to be true, and I've trained a lot, but I need you to prove it to me. And if you can prove it to me, I'll believe you. But I'll give you a chance, and if it works, I'm in. If it doesn't work, I'm out. Like that type of thing. And then so we started working together, and you were coming to classes and doing that stuff. That's what I mean by working together. And you quickly saw and had that moment of like, wow, I should have started this 10 years ago. Like, I can't believe I just waited and thought that just more hours in the saddle and like the bike seat was the answer instead of squatting and doing lunges and pressing overhead and things like that. So your this is where it was kind of one of the like your coachability kind of has like an asterisk next to it because it's like I would rate you as like a 9.5
Oh, damn.
coachability because when especially when we were doing our 90-minute sessions and we were doing that stuff, it's like if I told you to hold a pace, there was no like once you bought in, it was like, hey, hold this pace. And you were just like, and you just would do whatever it takes to hold that pace. And you weren't like questioning or anything because we had so much history of me proving it to you. So it's kind of like the stubbornness is bumping up against the coachability a little bit, but in terms of like your coachability is and I think still is a 9.5 as long as you're bought in. If you're not bought in, then obviously it's like a 2 or a 3.
I don't
That's
disagree with you.
true.
Do you disagree?
No, I said I don't disagree.
Oh, okay.
I feel
I
like that's like a trait of yours though, Drew. Like, do you feel like you're somebody who's always been like, once you know how something works, it's like black and white, like that's you just go for it?
well, I mean I think that's what Elliot's driving at though too is right like my personal downfall usually is doing too much. You know,
Mm,
like if there's a set program and I know, okay, this is what smart people are telling me I should be doing, but I'll say like, oh, and instead of doing this, I'm gonna do what they've told me to do, and I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna do more than that because in my like there's still in the back of my mind a little bit of that the whole idea that more is better.
mhm.
And
Yeah, I get
in terms of coffee, yes,
that.
that's still true. But in terms of training, what I've learned very quickly, and I think and I mean I think this there's an element of age to it as well. Like my body just can't handle the same amount of volume, but
Victim mindset limiting. Go ahead.
but what?
Nothing good.
But you know, as Elliot just said, right? We did this little training thing the other day, and I mean, I haven't done. It was a triathlon training thing, and I haven't done triathlon in 16 years, um, and I've never felt so sharp and snappy on the transitions
Mm,
in triathlon. It's like, you know, I mean, I haven't even been running. I could count on 3 fingers how many times I've gone running this year. And the only thing that you can attribute it to, and I think this is Elliot's point, like with the proof is right, is like what are the major changes that you've made in terms of your training regimen, and do you see results? Can you see that it works and it
Yeah.
makes an improvement? And obviously, like I'm a big believer that yes, you do, because I've seen it. I've seen it with my riding and with little things, like even with surfing, in terms of um in terms of just like general balance and
Yeah.
overall performance. You know what I mean? Like
All
it's
that jumping on boxes and,
right.
swinging on the bar, it actually translates
It
to
becomes so
many
much
different
more
things.
natural.
Yeah.
You can take I used to take, a month off or a month and a half off from surfing, and then it would be really difficult to get back up and
Mm.
figure it all out again. And now I can just kind of show up anytime and I'm usually pretty good. And I think that there's just an you know, overall cumulative strength and physiological understanding that you develop when you're consistent and
So do
when
you
you
think
listen.
sorry, do you think that you're doing less though? 'Cause rather than more to achieve that same feedback as you're doing things?
Right now, no, I've been doing a little more.
Okay.
I it's not it has the last couple weeks haven't been great. I mean, a part of it is the summer, for me
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like man, it's nice out. Why am I gonna settle for an hour long bike ride when I could do a 2 hour bike ride and do some weights, and make all the gains, and it's never a good idea.
Are you
But
fully off during this period? Because like, do you go to work in any sense during the summer?
I
Or
do
tutor.
I do a couple of things. Yeah, like I do some summer school stuff, and I still work do some weekend stuff, like still do some race announcing
Mm.
and things like that. But
Yeah, yeah.
overall I'm pretty free.
Okay.
So to kind of go back to the beginning of this main point was, I think with Shannon there were huge, more importantly, psychological changes that we made, and then that made the physiologic changes skyrocket,
Yeah,
right?
that
But we
was
had to fix the brain first and the perception of exercise in the body. Then the tolerance for physical and the capacity that you were able to gain was big. I don't think I changed Drew's mindset at all on almost anything. So like even though we joke, like I think like psychologically he's the same athlete in terms of how he approaches exercise and how he does things, which isn't a bad thing because he was kind of already really good. He was just, in my opinion, pointed in the wrong direction and just keep trying to build a trench deeper and deeper into a cycling world where I'm like, look, like, wait, pick your head up and look at these holes that we could just fill, and then that. So that's the, but then like physiologically, I feel like he's changed a lot
mm,
in terms of strength, and then maybe not body composition hasn't trained a lot or changed a lot, but in terms of just strength and positioning, like there were just a lot of just dysfunction in a body that is on that bike seat. Like I can't even get into the position that he does with like the very like tucked pelvis and
uh-huh.
then a huge rounded spine. Like it's great for cycling, but like my back isn't even long enough to do that. Like I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah.
trying to curl into that position and
Yeah.
I just can't get into that position yet. So
I think
I would disagree with you too, though, like in terms of composition. I think the there have been some pretty significant changes. Um and a lot of it just like, kind of jumping off what you guys were talking about with Shannon too, like it's just the approach to food and nutrition, and working with Jackie and
mm,
trying to make sure that I'm fueled for everything that I need to do and want to do too. So like, I might not be I don't know, I don't think physically look incredibly different from when I started, but there is a difference. Like if we look at the numbers and stuff, there's definitely a difference, and There are some noticeable changes for sure.
Yeah, and I would
It's
agree. I
definitely
think it is harder to notice 5 to 10 pounds on a 6 foot. What are you? 2, 3,
3,
5,
unfortunately, yeah.
6,
yeah.
3? Yeah, only
Versus
6'3".
30 pounds on a 5'3" woman.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So
So
yeah, I would agree with that. That like putting on like to go from like a skinny, lanky 6'3" to like a wow, you're so muscular. That has to be like probably 50 pounds, right?
yeah.
You'd have to put on a lot. So uh there was something that I want to bring up about Shannon.
Well, I want to say two things. First of all, shout out to Jackie, our registered dietitian here
Yeah.
at the gym, because for every one of my like kind of epiphany coaching moments that I've had with Elliot in our goal setting sessions, I've for 2 years been sitting with Jackie for half an hour every Thursday, dialing in my nutrition. And she always says that she didn't do anything and it was all me. But shout out to Jackie because she has helped me tremendously over the last 2 years. She's a huge part of that. Just that's what I mean when I say like having a support system, having somebody who knows what I'm doing. Like she's never going to be telling me like to cut my calories to some extreme degree. Like we talk about everything. So anyway, she's the best. The second point is that so your point about, like, fixing the mind first, fixing the brain first, I think it's important to recognize, especially, like, if we're talking to anybody out there who's, let's just say, at the end of the spectrum that is just on an unhealthy cycle about thinking about your body, about dieting starts Monday, cutting things out of your diet in extreme ways, like, all of those things that just have really no reward and end up sending you in the opposite direction that you wanna go. I think it's important to recognize that it's not just like this one conversation that it changed everything. Like it did, but I still walked out of here believing that I all I wanted to do was, be smaller. But wait, no, I can't wish that because that's not healthy. And so I have slowly moved that along that spectrum and I'm still not in this like, oh, I never think about, my body's aesthetics and all of that stuff. That's still very present. It's just that I can move past that and I can move past those thoughts and realize that, my body is an instrument and not an ornament. And I want to be able to do things and be healthy. And that's the driving force in my life is I want to live longer and live longer for my family. But it's still, I'm not just in this perfect place. I feel like that's important to recognize that it's just something that you're always working on. And that's okay. And it's actually a good thing to just be working on that, be present in that.
Absolutely.
So just want to share that for all my peeps out there.
And I think on this was a big journey for Shannon. I think that's why we're talking about so much. But I think another thing that we discovered in that class or that session was and I think Drew is also, he hasn't thought like that, or maybe not anymore. It's the like constantly trying to find the new good motivational quote that will get you pumped
Right.
up for that week. So it's almost like
Popsicle
you kept,
sticks.
yeah, you kept looking for that next hit of like motivation, motivation, motivation. I just need to be more motivated. And anytime I would be like, well, listen, like you have to lean into the discomfort or like things that you should really subscribe to. You're like, no, 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 I know that. I know I just need to do it. I know. And it was like, and at one point I was like, all right, Shannon, well, you know everything that I know.
Yeah.
So why aren't you doing it? And you're just like, I just keep getting my one way. It's like, okay, well, you have to subscribe to one of these. And speaking of subscribing, if you're still listening, please uh minimize and then subscribe. It's free. Like and comment your favorite moment of this podcast. Thanks. Anyway, so you have to subscribe to one of those things, and they can be corny sometimes, but you subscribe to something that then makes you more disciplined. So you're like, because doing the thing is what is actually
Mhm.
like when you referenced with Jackie, she didn't tell you any one magical thing, but meeting with her for a year, every single month, 30 minutes, week after week after week after week, and then all of a sudden you got lucky and now you have the body that you want, or you're in the direction of the body. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, well, it's just all about removing the noise. There's so much noise, and we make so many food decisions and health decisions in a day. Like it's like over 200 actually in a day if you measure it. But it's about weeding out the noise and finding that like central voice that even though you're, going crazy about all sorts of different things in your mind about, oh, I should eat this, I shouldn't eat that. Now I'm being crazy, blah blah blah. You just can find what you want, and like you said, subscribe to that voice, but it's a matter of just, finding it and moving forward.
Drew, what's your favorite motivational quote? Are you
Hello?
frozen?
No, I'm not frozen. I'm thinking.
Whoa.
You-
Sorry. Go ahead.
People gonna X out of the window
I
thinking
was
the
like,
podcast is over.
I know. I like was squinting. I was like, wow, that is some still. I'm glad you
There-
added the lamp, by the way, but good.
there's a scene in this old cycling documentary where this really insane rider who's like he's a real character and personality was at the front of the bunch, and you can hear him over the team radio saying, I'm in the first line. I'm in the first line. I've got to get going. I've got to get going. Like he's at the front of the group and he's like, okay, I'm going to attack now and just make everybody's life miserable. I don't think it's really a motivational quote, but I've always really liked that one. So whenever I
think that
found
mindset, that type of like, oh,
like
I'm in the front now. It's time to add distance to break the band or whatever.
yeah, it's like it's a really
Hmm.
really interesting approach. And while I couldn't like, I don't know, I'd find myself in the front of the group or something, and I was actually just talking to a friend about this yesterday, just this race that we had earlier this year, and I was in the first line, and some really good guy attacked early on in the race, and I was like, well, I'm in the first line. I should cover that move. It's probably not the smartest thing to do, but I did it anyways. And I think it's a good, I don't know, a good general metaphor, right? Because like if I didn't cover that move, um, later in the day I would have been like, oh, I really should have gone with that. Like that would have been a good effort, and who knows what would have happened. Like I don't know. It's a good mindset. If you're at the front, that's good, but you could always push a little bit harder and try to be ahead even more.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's probably not how I would think.
Right. You're
Although,
not there
although I
yet.
do like to be the big dog in the gym.
Yeah.
Gotta love a snatch day when it's like all people who are beginners. Just
All right.
put
Now
me in
it's
there, coach.
now it's time for Shannon to get offended.
All right, let's go.
This is good. We're however
I
minutes
don't
in.
subscribe to cancel culture.
So now I out of 1 to 10, 1 to 10, you said cancel culture, and I just watched that movie. I was very interested in watching that movie. What is a Woman?
Oh boy, here we go.
I watched that. I'm not going to go
Let's
into
let
it.
the two boys in the room speak on that topic.
No. It wasn't. It's a little bit different than what it sounds. But
Okay, give it to me. What are we talking about now?
now we're talking about you as a classmate.
Shoot.
So Shannon might get a little bit offended. I would say that Shannon. Let's go. Yeah, we'll go Shannon and then immediately go to Drew and not let Shannon talk about it. So you're either a 6 or a 7 as a classmate, and Drew is a 7.5.
Wow, you got me beat, Drew.
Really?
What Elliot doesn't know is that I'm gonna be fine for this podcast, but I'm gonna cry in my car after
So
this.
Drew, let's talk about you because Shannon doesn't really care about that rating at all. So Drew, the reason you're a 7.5 out of that, I have you as a 3 as enthusiastic with an asterisk, meaning you're enthusiastic in your own way. You know what I mean? Like, because if I was in class with someone like you, it would motivate me because I know that you're not there to like have a good time. You're putting all of that enthusiasm into hitting the right numbers and pushing yourself. Where at the end of the workout, the beep happens and you're done. Like that was everything. And so you were there, you showed up, you didn't really talk because you were more business. And you'll talk a little bit or pet your dog or give me something to vacuum or whatever, but you
He talks when I make him talk. I'm like,
right.
Drew.
And then when people engage, you'll talk and you're very thoughtful with your comments and everything, but you're for me, you would be a great classmate and I love having you in class. But then some people can see that as if they don't know you, they're like, oh, that guy's really quiet and I don't think he wants to be here.
Well, I am really quiet. I think that's like one of my not fatal flaws, but being an introvert, or like especially, I don't know, like people like, how are you an introvert? You're on this podcast. But I'm definitely a social introvert in those big social situations, right? I'm not gonna like, I don't know, I'm not good with small talk. I have to train myself ahead of time to kind of be like, all right, what's a good entry point into this conversation? So that's not real. That's just not me. So I'm actually surprised that you even said 7.5. I would have thought you would have said like, oh, you're a 2 because
Well, you're a 3 is enthusiastic. Yeah, so that would I
yeah,
think that's what we're but,
But that's not everything, right? Like, that's not enthusiasm isn't everything about being a good classmate, and
oh,
that's the point
absolutely.
that you're gonna make, right?
With
Because
for you,
so
yeah,
there's
so
other things that he's gotta go up for, but my point is this, that the quiet consistency helps build enthusiasm about the gym for some people more than others, because there are
absolutely.
certainly plenty of people who come in here and, you're more verbose classmate. I don't know who that might be, but a more outgoing, eccentric classmate who comes in here screaming. Um, they might not be everyone's cup of tea, and that's why we have the downstairs. I see all the people that go
Okay.
downstairs, but I'm just saying that seeing somebody who's come years over years and, is in the Instagram photos and is still coming, but is having that quiet consistency, it makes an impact too.
Yeah, one person that comes to mind is, Erin V, as we call her.
Oh, yeah,
She just
the dark
we can't
horse.
get rid of her. She's just killing it. She's doing at-home workouts. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's like anything that we give her that she asks for, and it's just like,
Yeah,
"Oh, it's
never
done."
like talk to her on like, on the Facebook group on like a chat here and there, like once or twice in my life, and then we did the competition together in January, and she's next level.
Yeah, it's out of control. It's just, like, so quiet and reserved, but you're just like, "Oh, you're just here every single day, haven't missed a minute of class,
Yeah,
at home, putting in the work." It's awesome to see.
yeah.
And
See,
also working with Jackie, and Jackie says the same thing of killing it, but she's not here to defend herself, so we should stop complimenting her.
okay.
So now Shannon,
See, if I'm gonna do something interesting, people got to watch.
yeah.
People got to see it.
So Shannon is like a 6.5, 7 classmate because she is that polarizing, like, sometimes way too happy. There's transitions, right? Because, like, if you're in a bad mood and you
Hmm.
want like, there's a blessing and a curse to being the hype person in class, because if you show up and you don't really feel like being hype because you just got out of a meeting or you're tired or you're
Hmm.
like you're just not feeling it, then people are kind of like, "Oh, Shannon's in a bad mood. I'm gonna
Yeah,
pull
yeah, yeah.
back a little bit."
Makes an impact on class if I'm
And
just being normal.
people don't want to shine because sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, Shannon just pulled up. I'm ready for that energy boost that she's about to bring." And you kind of just sit down and you're like, "Hey," and everyone's like, "Oh, I guess we're not excited today. Okay." And then there's other people that, show up to class and you're like, "Hey," I should have put on autotune for that. But and they're just like, I guess it's a downstairs day, and just like a slow walk. And it's like, "Hey guys, there's only 3 people in class, Shannon and 2 others. Why are you downstairs?"
Okay, let's be clear. That has never happened.
What has never happened?
Where I'm the only one upstairs. Come on.
No, no, no. I mean 3 people in class, and there's like 2 up here with you, but then there's like 1 or 2
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah,
downstairs.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's done that. Where it's
I've
like,
never been completely left alone
like,
in fuck this girl.
yeah, because you would move with the, "Oh, we're all going downstairs. All right, guys, do you guys want to skip? I have a song." Yeah, so there's that. And then the last thing, I don't know how much longer we want to get into this, or we had another
I'm
topic.
not offended yet, man.
Well, not yet, because you haven't processed what I'm telling you.
Yeah, all right.
And then this one I left blank because this one's really tough for different reasons. It
Oh
was
boy.
the just the natural athlete. So like we get people that come in and everyone has baggage, good and bad baggage. And Drew came as a very his training age was very, very high, but in one aspect, whereas your training age was very low, but the training that you have done, like dance and you used to do CrossFit a little bit, you you were more of a blank canvas, so we could make adjustments that were just
Mhm.
better. Where Drew had some like like it takes a really long time to get in the shapes and make your body form to that bike. Like, you can tell when you see Drew on a bike, he knows exactly what he's doing and he's in the right position. And it takes hours and hours and months of time to like get into those positions. Just like when you see a swimmer swim through the pool, they're hitting positions and moving in a way that you're like, this seems very natural to you. Or a
Mhm.
runner, like when you watch Stephanie run,
She's
she obviously didn't
just
just do a
weightless.
couch to 5K and then
Yeah.
is now doing it. Like, she was like, that is her jam. So with that comes some negatives, right? So like having that really good position, really long back, rounded, kind of head low, doesn't really lend itself great for deadlifts.
Yeah, yeah.
because your hip flexors are super short, your like QL low back are super long. So then when you go for tension, there still always seems to be a little bit of slack in the line, or it's used to holding something very light for 2 hours, but it is not used to contracting aggressively multiple times over and over.
Mhm.
So Drew had, we had to slowly walk back, where it can be frustrating because he's like, "Oh, I'm crushing the assault bike, then I'm lapping everyone around the building, and then I have to power clean 35 pounds, and I'm like getting beat up after class." And it's like, well, what's like? I want all of the intensity that I can bring on the assault bike to the barbell, and you have to
Mhm.
really communicate with people, and this is where stubbornness can be really bad, is that they like refuse to just take the ego hit and be like, "Hey, any barbell weights, like you're not good enough to just be where you think, like you can RX, let's say, all the monostructural things and maybe even all the gymnastics, but with the barbell you're just not in the right positions and you're going to hurt yourself." Where Shannon, yours were, you had the explosive from like dance and the coordination of like watch somebody do something and then you can quickly program yourself to move like that. But you had some body limitations. So like some of like, abdomen kind of making your background so you can't get in the best thing where like your stomach is touching your legs, or that turned out position. That was like the biggest fight that you had with us as coaches. We'd be like, "Hey, you need to like turn your feet," and you're like, "Deadlifts kill me." And we're like, "That's because you walk with your feet turned out." And you're like, well, I don't know. I want to.
Well,
And
and
when
it's
you,
like that's one of those things that you have this belief that you're like, "That's how I walk then." Like, that's how I walk.
oh yeah, I get
That you
people that are
can't
like, "Oh, I
change
have
that.
flat feet and knock
Well, let
knees,"
me
and you're
tell
like,
you
uh,
right here, you can change
you
that
can get arches in
by
your feet for
going
sure.
by going on a walk every single day for 45 minutes and watching yourself walk and forcing yourself to walk with your feet straight. That's what I
And
did.
initially you kind of like gave us some pushback because you were like, it's kind of making it worse. Like this is really tough. I don't think it should be this hard. So you were like carrying baggage of like walking for 10 minutes with your feet straight shouldn't be this hard. So it might be
Yeah, I'm
wrong.
like, "Why does my ass hurt?
Like,
This is
but
not
now my
right."
low back and my legs and my hamstrings, like everything is engaged. And Meg and I are like, "Yep." And then so now deadlifts aren't as big of a
They're
deal.
still
So
my kryptonite, but yes, they're
it's the
not that
same
bad.
thing. It's like when we find something that intense, you really have to take a step back and deadlift a lot less. Like with your feet turned out and kind of slightly hunched over, you
Yeah.
could probably deadlift like at that time when we first discovered it, like 30% more. And then you're like, but why would I go back? But then you're like, okay, well, train this. And now maybe your potential for lifting isn't the same, but your durability as an athlete, rep after rep, year after year, is going to just be so much higher because
Yeah.
you're not just lifting with only your ass or only your low back or only your hamstrings.
Yeah.
Right, Drew?
That's exactly right.
So do you feel like you've been able to work past your, like, I don't know if backgrounding is the only example, but did you have anything like that that you have been able to strip away to be a better CrossFit athlete, or is that just not
Like
your
ankles collapsing and sorry, I have all of his.
Yeah, no, I think I think the biggest thing for me in terms of like the actual lifting part is I've had to change my mindset to just knowing that like, oh, Meg and Elliot are gonna find something wrong with what I'm doing every time, and I just have to be okay with taking the criticism and working on it. Like that's
Yeah.
and but they're not wrong either, right? Like that's what you learn really quickly. Like they'll tell you to do
Yeah.
something, and it's not just because they want you to look foolish. It's because that's the right way to do it, and it's gonna help you. Like the other day we were working on butterfly kipping butterfly pull-ups,
Mhm.
and like
Not doing
I'm not very good at those. And Meg was like, "Oh, think about this and don't do this. It's going to feel weird for a second, but this is what you should be doing."
Yeah.
And I made the change, and oh my god, it felt so much better. So it's just a matter of like, for me, I guess I would say I've perfected like, one physical thing in bike riding, and that's great. But CrossFit has forced me to relearn or learn how to do 500 different things, and there are another 10 different components for every little movement that you do as well. So it's just training your body to do 5,000 new
I
things.
think I think when you start, you're in it morphs. So when you first start CrossFit, you get frustrated because there are 1,000 movements plus. And then once you start getting good, they all start blending together and you're like, "Oh, I can apply this to that and that to
Oh yeah,
this."
yeah.
And then when you start getting really, really good, then you start separating them again. And then you're going back to 1,000 different movements because you tweak every single little thing. And then they start so it's like an accordion of like your perception of the movements that you have to do in the positions. And then they all start to be like, "Oh, a push jerk is kind of like a power clean, like the leg things are the same." Or a deadlift is kind of like a kettlebell swing and things like that. And so you start like, uh, it's
Things transfer.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And so the topic, which is like, this is probably the most often that Meg and I like brief and debrief each other on like the classes and how everybody's doing. The topic that just where we kind of just stare at each other with our head sideways is, and it seems when you talk to people like in a setting like this, they're like, who would do that? Like, I get it. But then when it's happening in real time, it happens to us all the time where there will be situations that we're like, "Hey, you should do it this way." And at first, you're gonna be a little bit worse, but it's gonna make you so much better. And whether that's we say that in a cue or we're like trying to explain it and we only have a couple seconds in class, especially in the middle of a metcon. And people just look at us and be like, "Oh, okay," and then not do what we're asking. So some of the time we're like, maybe we just didn't communicate it right, but there will be times where like, "Hey, you need to." A good example is like getting your heels down on the rower and not bringing your toes up or bringing your heels up and then driving with the quads. Most people can get a faster monitor readout if they just do it like that. But we'll say like, "Here, change your stroke, do this," and they see the monitor and the monitor goes slower, and then they're kind of like, they're lying to me. They're slowing me down. And I'm like, overall, just big picture, why would I want to slow you down, right? The best thing that I could possibly do is make you all way fitter than me. And then that's what we just sell,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just take pictures of that, send it to the media and be like, "Hey guys, this is what I'm trying to do." And it sounds weird. You're like, who would do that? And Drew gave an example of like he made a change and it was for the better, but it happens all the time where we're like,
Dude,
"Hey, it needs to."
it really like it's the whole trust the process thing. Like there's a few types of people in this world. There's the people who genuinely want to put their heels down when they're on the rower, but like their brain to body connection is too distant. Like there
Right.
are
Yeah.
genuinely people who just can't put that together.
Right.
There's people who can and just do it. And that's your like coachability 10.
Right.
They just do it. It's Drew on the bike, just hammering out at the pace. Like they do it. There's then the people who this has been me over the years that do it, but it doesn't feel good or it doesn't feel natural or they don't feel like they can do it. And so it's like, okay, let me just go back to the way I'm doing because that's better than not doing it at all.
Are you
But
are you speaking metaphorically, or are you talking specifically about getting your heels on the rower,
no,
or
I'm not.
both?
I'm speaking more like
Talking power clean weight,
yeah, I'm
talking
talking
wall
about
ball height,
everything. I'm
air
talking
squat
all of
depth,
those things like
push-ups.
and I realized it actually pretty recently that I'm that type of person because I would always think like, oh, I take the feedback, I'm pretty good. I did a like one-on-one session with Meg that was all about toast to bar. And toast to bar are something that I've been so close but yet so far away for a while. And she gave me these things that I could work on and none of them really feel good. I don't feel strong when I'm hanging from the bar. I don't feel very capable when I'm hanging from the bar. So I just, start to back off right away. Well, I watched her working on something of her own, Meg, Coach Meg. She was trying to do this really strange sort of like gymnastics drill. And she's on the floor and she's just like flopping on the ground. Hi, Taz. Flopping on the ground. Oh, did it mess
We should
anything
be
up?
good. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Um, she was like flopping on the ground at first and she kept watching this video and like, oh, I don't know how to do it. And she sat there for like 10 minutes 15 minutes, 20 minutes, trying again. And then all of a sudden she just started getting it. And I realized like I would not have been sitting there for 15 minutes working on it. And she looked just as, as it looked like the drill was hopeless. Like it wasn't going to be happening. And I hope she remembers what I'm talking about, because it really did take a while. But then she got it. And that made me realize that I'm that type of person too. So sometimes people are, like we've been saying this whole time, just getting in their own way or just stopping before they believe in themselves.
And sometimes that's a disservice that we do where, you know, Meg and I and Maria were coaching all of the classes. So sometimes the only time that it makes sense is for Meg and I to meet in the middle of the day and work out then, instead of working out with classes, because then we would, lose a lot of consistency in our training. So but you don't get to see us struggle. And then Meg is definitely not going to let me be like, hey, can I video for you the next 20 minutes while you just really suck at this? She's gonna be like, I don't want
Yeah,
that
no.
online.
Yeah.
And so, but that happens. That happens to me. And then, but what you see is the result in class of us just like, we practice on things that we're not good at all the time, and we fail and we fail. And then when we go and demo things, most of the time we're demoing scaling options of movements that we can already do.
Mhm.
So it kind of just looks like, oh,
Yeah, it
Elliot
looks
can
like
do that.
cake.
It's
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, because I not only I practice that, but I know I'm going to be demoing it. And if I couldn't do it, I wouldn't just be like, look, do it like this. Like I'm not, I would just say like, hey, I can't do this, but blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, every time you demo toast to bar, I'm irritated.
It's
It's
like
silly.
frustrating, right? And yeah, and certain things came very naturally to me, like as I progressed. But um there's to think that it all comes naturally to everybody, and that the cues that we're giving you to work on that are steps back, those are absolutely, like, most of the time we're like 90 to 100% sure, like, this should, like, there's certain cues that you're like, hey, do it like this, and you'll get an instant like, wow, that feels better. And not every cue is like that. Most of the time on the really hard stuff, you have to take the step back to be able to progress forward. But everybody wants the, oh, straighten your arms when you're doing the snatcher, or bring it in a little closer, and they do that. That was way better. That felt
Right,
good.
right,
And they
right.
think that every
But you actually
positive,
feel like off balance and strange because you've never done that before. And
yes,
yeah.
but every cue that takes a long time, like changing a running or like a mechanical thing that should feel natural, or something you've done for a long time, feels very like, whoa, I have to slow way down to do this. And it's like, yeah,
Mm.
but you got to slow way down to go way faster.
Drew, I'm going to ask you this question, and then I'm going to say something that so you have a chance to think about the question. Is there any sort of movement or thing like that that you have transformed from the beginning thanks to Elliot's coaching or Meg's coaching that you didn't think that you would? That's my question to you. Um, but I think you have to have those moments. I think you have to have those moments where you actually transform something, and that's how you become somebody who trusts the process. Like you have to kind of get a little bit of proof. And I think if there's somebody that's out there that goes to our gym that hasn't had that thing, there's all sorts of different elements of fitness, right? There's coordination and flexibility and strength and endurance. Whatever one is like your most natural thing, because a true athlete's going to be like good at all sorts of things. I have coordination. I knew early on that like double unders is probably going to be that RX thing that I could get. And as soon as you hammer on, like pick that thing that you think you're close to, or that Elliot or Meg, better yet, think you're close to, because that can sometimes
There's
be
also,
off.
oh, I'm so
I'm
close,
so
and you're
close
like,
to climbing a rope.
like, oh, nope.
Nope. But find that thing that's like generally close and go for that thing and give it some real effort and really listen to the coaching and give that a try, and don't give up on yourself or on that thing. And when you get that thing, because you will get that thing if you do it how you're coached, then I, that's when you start seeing the proof in the pudding, and you start saying, okay, I can push through a little harder. I can be more like Meg, swinging on the bar, feeling strange, and trust that it's going to get somewhere.
All
Okay,
right, Drew,
Drew.
girl.
Okay, two answers. The first one would be pull-ups. Just like as just a
Mm.
strict pull-up. So when I started at the gym, I couldn't do a strict pull-up. Like I mean, I could fake my way through it, but actually doing like a good strict pull-up, couldn't do it. Um and a lot of that's just like putting in the time and putting in the effort to get there. But just like from where I started to where I am now is huge. I think, especially coming from coming from my background where strength is not really valued, like upper body strength is not valued. So
Mm.
most people will be like, oh, I can't even do a pull up.
And
I
what
think
changed? Like, how did you change?
just consistency and um
And enthusiasm.
and listening to the different cues. Like I would always short arm my pull ups. You know what I mean? So like you
Yeah.
go down, not go all the way down to the bottom and
To keep that tension.
maintain. I was going to say maintain tension. Um, I would just keep the tension all in my arms, and maybe go past just a little bit past 90 degrees. Maybe we'll say like 120 degrees in my arms, and then go back up. And like that's not a real pull up. But that was the only way that I could do it, because that was the way to maintain the tension. Now I'm like totally comfortable just, going down to the bottom, hanging out, reestablishing tension if I need to, and pulling back up. That was huge. And there were some moments where, Elliot this was really early on. Elliot would, tell me that this is what you should be achieving for, or looking to achieve. And we just kind of put that in place, and over time it has become much better. And then the other thing that Meg and I started working on right before the pandemic was handstand walking, and that's still a work in progress. I mean, it's gotten better, but it was like one of the things that in my mind is I still need to put the time in to do it. But there were some specific drills and techniques that she was like, okay, this is what you need to try. This is what you need to be practicing. And that for me is like is something that I've gotten better with, but it's still unfinished business.
I like those two examples though, because you have to start to appreciate the like micro improvements at some point, or else, because I'm going to get off my soapbox here momentarily, but to start again, I think you should be that person that if you need this to keep on track, find that thing that you can win at, and then keep accumulating those wins, and before you know it, you're doing all sorts of things you couldn't do before. But at some point, you're not going to get things as quickly as you once did, or you're going to be moving into the strength zone where it's not your forte and you have to work harder. I'm in the same boat with my pull-ups, so maybe you can help me, Drew.
All right, so let's talk about what we want to do for next episode. You guys could rate me if you'd like, and do all that stuff. You guys could drill me, or we could talk about coaching. We could talk about the topic that Drew and I were talking about, where like the worst type of people in events, where you have like the elite athletes all the way down to the participants. We could kind of rank those. That could be an interesting topic. If you, the listener, has something that you want us to talk about, or be like, no, we want to, we want you to roast Shannon more. We want to, let us know, and we can get some material. They could just talk a bunch of crap on me and my idiosyncrasies. But do you guys have anything else?
I think Drew and I should come up with our own like 3-point scale for coaching, and we should rate you, and maybe just you. Like, we can't put Meg on blast unless she's going to be here.
Yeah, we would
We
have to
can't
have
put
Meg on
Maria
that.
on
So like,
blast.
yeah, you can just give me a bunch of attributes of a coach, and then like 1 to 10 on all those things, and then why, and then I can try to defend myself of why I'm clearly all 10s.
Yeah.
And then, we could talk about my philosophy of coaching and why I am the way I am in certain ways, and don't give people the things that it's good that.
Hey, save it for the podcast, man.
Okay. Let me hit you with an outro song in C sharp, and then Drew will close us out. 1 second. This is the outro song.
Wow, Elliot just really nailed that. If you enjoyed this episode of the Dauntless Academy podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us 5 stars if that's a thing, or a thumbs up, or 10 smiley faces, and leave plenty of comments in the comment section about what you liked. If you didn't like it, well,
Left alone.
you have a special place in my heart. Hope you have a good week, and we'll see you on episode number 5, which is coming up very soon.